special bonus episode of For All the Saints. Not a full-length one, but basically there's a new Angel Studios movie coming out on the 7th of March in the UK, but it's also being released in the US, about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And you can stay tuned for an exclusive interview with the writer and director of the movie. But I first want to tell you a little bit about Dietrich. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer is an inspiration of mine, not only because we look exactly the same, and you can Google him after to prove it, but because he is a shining example of finding strength in the gospel during times of trial and adversity. Bonhoeffer was a German pastor theologian during Adolf Hitler's reign, when Nazi influence had infested many of the German churches. For example, crosses were replaced with swastikas, and they adorned the pulpit too. The Old and New Testament were edited to emphasize Aryan supremacy, with proposed plans to fully remove the Old Testament because of its Jewish foundation. In fact, anyone descended from Jews, even if their Jewish influence was generations past, was banned from worshipping in the church. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was always either the first or leading voice in publicly standing up to the Nazi influence within the church, and of course the horrific actions of the Nazis in wider society. He continued to give courageous sermons under Gestapo surveillance. A quote from one of his sermons in 1933 reads, "The church has only one Lord, and that is Jesus Christ. The church does not belong to the Führer." Bonhoeffer was arrested in 1943, moved to Gestapo prison in 1944 in horrendous conditions, and was finally sent to Flossenburg concentration camp in 1945, where he would be executed only 2 weeks before the camp was liberated by US soldiers at the age of 39. In one of his final letters before he was killed, he wrote, "My past life is brimful of God's goodness, and my sins are covered by the forgiving love of Christ crucified. I'm most thankful for the people I have met, and I only hope they will never have to grieve for me, but that they too will always be certain of and thankful for God's mercy and forgiveness." On his final day, he led a service for the other prisoners, preaching a sermon on Isaiah 53:5, "With his stripes we are healed." He had hardly finished saying the closing prayer when the door opened, and 2 men called to him, "Prisoner Bonhoeffer, get ready, come with us." The words "come with us" for all prisoners had come to mean only one thing: he was about to be hanged. Bonhoeffer at this point said, "This is the end. For me, the beginning of life." A fellow prisoner who witnessed the execution wrote this: "Through the half-open door in one room of the huts, I saw Pastor Bonhoeffer, before taking off his prison garb, kneeling on the floor praying fervently to his God. I was most deeply moved by the way this lovable man prayed, so devout and so certain that God heard his prayer. At the place of execution, he again said a short prayer and then climbed the steps to the gallows, brave and composed. His death was ensured after a few seconds. In the almost 50 years that I worked as a doctor, I have hardly ever seen a man die so entirely submissive to the will of God." So what you're about to see is the trailer for the movie, and then a short interview that I was able to do with the writer and director of the movie Bonhoeffer, Todd Komarnicki, who is a prolific Hollywood writer and producer, by the way, with hits such as Sully and Elf. Todd mentions a poem in the interview that Dietrich wrote in prison. And so before we go into the trailer and the interview, I just want to read that to you and leave you with an invitation to watch the movie if you're able to. It's so worth it, and you will leave feeling inspired and a desire to be brave in your discipleship of Jesus Christ. So here's the poem, "Who Am I" by Bonhoeffer. Who am I? They often tell me I would step from my cell's confinement calmly, cheerfully, firmly, like a country squire from his country house. Who am I? They often tell me I would talk to my warders freely and friendly and clearly, as though it were mine to command. Who am I? They also tell me I would bear the days of misfortune equably, smilingly, proudly, like one accustomed to win. Am I then really all that which other men tell of? Or am I only what I know of myself, restless and longing and sick, like a bird in a cage, struggling for breath, as though hands were compressing my throat, yearning for colours, for flowers, for the voices of birds, thirsting for words of kindness, for neighbourliness, trembling with anger at despotisms and petty humiliation, tossing in expectation of great events, powerlessly trembling for friends at an infinite distance, weary and empty at praying, at thinking, at making, faint and ready to say farewell to it all. Who am I, this or the other? Am I one person today and tomorrow another? Am I both at once, a hypocrite before others, and before myself a contemptibly woebegone weakling? Or is something within me still, like a beaten army, fleeing in disorder from victory already achieved? Who am I? They mock me, these lonely questions of mine. Whoever I am, thou knowest, O God, I am thine.
Something's coming. Something unstoppable.
Look around you, my friend. How much light do you see?
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds when I was sleeping.
Hate comes in every color.
And the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sun.
We have devised a plot to assassinate the Führer.
You will go to England as our spy.
Churchill sees Germany as a home. He's afraid that a bomb traced to England would mean invasion or worse.
Invasion? Invasion? My country was invaded from within.
And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made.
Hi, Hitler!
And the sign flashed out its warning. And the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words on the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls and whispered in the sun.
I'm ready to meet my destiny.
Of silence.
Well, Todd, this is an honor to speak to you. Thanks for letting me join this press junket, and I'm sure you've had a crazy day of interviews, but to get
I've
straight
had a
into
crazy 5 months of interviews,
yes, yeah, I'm sure.
but this is my first one with Benjamin Hancock, so I'm all in.
That's very kind of you. And I was honored to attend one of the screenings for Bonhoeffer. It was just brilliant and inspiring. So congratulations on such an achievement.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
sure, I don't know personally, but I'm sure it takes an incredible amount of effort to make a movie. So I'm interested why this was the story for you that kind of showed itself to be worth all of that effort.
Yeah, I've been answering this question the same way. It had nothing to do with me. It was just my life is a series of events where I drift off, and this is my entire life. I drift off, and then God comes over and, like a mother dog, picks me up by the back of the neck and carries me over where I'm supposed to be. And then I drift off again. But I'm constantly being reoriented by God. And so clearly God wanted me to tell this story. I didn't know the story. When I was offered the job, I said no. After I wrote it, when I was offered the directing job, I said no. And literally, it was day 10 of shooting, and I'm in a cathedral in Belgium, surrounded by 100 extras, and everything's being set up for the day. And I said, "Okay, Lord, I'll direct this film," because I had to laugh at myself. Like that's what a slow student I am in his call to my life. So I was not as instinctive as Dietrich, and I'm trying to be more instinctive in listening to the direction. He seems to have to tap me several times on the shoulder to get me to go in the direction that he wants. But definitely, all of this happened because of the Lord, 100%.
I'm sure that tapping on the shoulder is something that many Christians can relate to in all of the spheres of our life, really. So it's refreshing to hear that. And do you find this is common or uncommon with the projects that you've worked on in the past, that has this thing where God has found you? Do you still see that serendipity with mainstream movies in Hollywood and other projects you've worked on, or is this kind of unique in that regard?
Well after the fact, I could say yes about those
Right.
studio movies, because everything takes forever. Everything takes 7 years, and everything's a surprise. I mean, Sully getting made was a complete afterthought, because when I turned in the second draft of that script, a movie called Flight got released. And it was not a true story, but it was Denzel Washington, a movie star in a
Yeah.
plane crash movie about an investigation. And so we were told, everybody at my agency and the producers were told, there's not room for 2 plane crash movies. And it doesn't matter that your movie is a true story. And we didn't have a director, and we didn't have Tom Hanks. We just had the script. And so the producers said, we're taking this movie underground. We're just going to not share it with anyone. And they did that for 5 years, to the point where I forgot that I wrote it almost. And then out of nowhere, Alan Stewart, the producer, she calls me and she said, there are 2 names that could take us from forgotten to pre-production. Pick one of them. And I guess Steven Spielberg. And she said, no. And I guess Clint Eastwood. And she said, yes, Clint is going to direct your movie. He's calling you this afternoon to congratulate you. That was after 5 years of complete silence. So yes, I could see after the fact, God had a plan. But while I was waiting for 5 years, I was pretty disappointed. And what happened with the Bonhoeffer project is it was much more me continually saying no and him saying yes. So I think that was different. This was more of a wrestling match where I kept thinking that I was right, but I was wrong.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And actually, sticking on this kind of subject, I mean, your career is so illustrious. There are some really like amazing films that you've worked on and been a pivotal part of. And again, just after the fact now, with Bonhoeffer as a completed project, um, were there any other major differences that were unique on working on such a specifically Christian film compared to the previous ones you've worked on? Were there any other
Well,
insights or differences you could pick out?
well, I do want to make a point that's very important to me. This is not a Christian film. This is not a faith-based film. It is a movie about a man of faith. And that's very different. There's kind of a ghetto of what's considered faith-based films, and they have a set of rules, and some of them are phenomenal, but they tend to have a set of rules that's kind of altar call focused. And this movie actually asks all the hard questions of, did I make the right choice? Did God really call me to this? This is, I definitely consider this a Garden of Gethsemane kind of movie. And I think Dietrich lived his faith very much in the garden. And I find that deeply relatable. So yes, it is clear in its intention that our hero loves Jesus and follows Jesus to the cross without question. But because it's not a faith-based film, it's a movie about a man of faith, it shows all the raw difficulty that comes with that. The edges are not sanded down. It's a costly thing. It's called the cost of discipleship, to really walk with the Lord to every avenue he wants you to walk. And he's the map, he's the compass, and we have to surrender. It means that a lot of our life is lived in wide wonder and confusion, and we see terrible things happen to people we love, and it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense years later. Right now, my sister, my oldest sister, who has been an angel on earth for her entire life, is in her early 60s, and she's battling ALS, what I think in Europe is called a motor neuron disease. And it makes zero sense to anybody that knows her. And it makes zero sense to me why she's suffering. But that doesn't make me question my faith. It just makes me be like David in the Psalms saying, where are you? Because I know he's here. And if I don't see him in something, it doesn't mean that he's not there. It just means I don't see him yet. So I take the difficulties and I lean on scripture, like rejoice in all things, not rejoice for all things, but rejoice in all things, and just do everything I can to go deeper into relationship. Because if my daughter at tuck-in time has a question, she will call from the back of the apartment, and I'll hear, Dad, Dad, Dad. And she will call until I come, and we will talk through the issue. And then I will go back out front and sit down, and I will hear, Dad, Dad, Dad. And she's doing that because she feels unsettled and she doesn't know the answer to whatever she's worrying about. But she's also doing that because she wants to be deeper in relationship with the person she trusts. And so that is me as a person of faith. I'm calling out to my dad, to my Abba Father. I don't understand this. I can't sleep tonight. Why is my sister sick? Why is everything so dark politically? What's happening in the world? Dad, Dad, Dad. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way up until he holds me in his arms in heaven, because this life is a constant calling from God to the children that he made and loves. And he never changes. We're the ones that change. And the gift of needing him, the gift of needing to call out, Dad, 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 is its own truth. There is something in there that it's not that you're baptized once and it's all done. You have to go on a journey deeper into Christ. That's not an accident. It's how God set it up. I don't understand it, but I'm going to live it out.
I love that. And I love that mention earlier of it being a Garden of Gethsemane story, reflection. I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And well, something undeniable about the movie is that you leave and it leaves an indelible impression on you. And I wonder, from what you're saying there, what do you hope is the impression that people leave with when they exit the theater?
I want them to leave with this feeling of walking on a tightrope between hope and despair. And if they're Christians, to know that hope wins. And if they're not, to hope that hope wins. I have a dear friend, a German photographer, who is an atheist, and he saw my movie twice, and he stood on the street corner with tears in his eyes, and he said, Todd, your movie is a sermon, and I am listening. That's what I hope for everyone that gets a chance to watch it.
Wow. I mean, that's really powerful. Thank you for that. And yeah, I'm actually quite surprised that I didn't know this is how it worked, in that you didn't know about Bonhoeffer before, or know intimately about his story before. I thought this would have been like you spearheading this project from the off, but you were brought in. And well, that kind of tells me that you must have done a lot of studying about Bonhoeffer when writing and getting ready for this. And I'm interested because something that the film does, it makes you really want to read Bonhoeffer's work, especially at the end when you're invited essentially to look at his breadth of writings. It's a really powerful invitation at the end. So I'm thinking, like, is there a part of Bonhoeffer's story and writings that particularly stood out to you when you were preparing to make the movie?
Well, the poem he wrote, Who Am I, is a very powerful message of him wrestling with all the decisions he's made. I mean, he's really asking, am I the person everyone says I am? Am I the funny dinner party guest? Am I beloved by all who meet me? Or am I a killer? Am I already a defeated army? He writes that his humanity is so clear in that poem, and it winds up just like the Psalms. Again, this beautiful ending. No matter where you go, no matter how far you push at the boundaries of mystery, or where are you, God? Where's the love? Where are you? Have you forgotten me? Psalm 22, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Which Jesus quotes on the cross. That this searching always comes back to your love endures forever. It always goes back to, I know my Redeemer liveth, like it says in Job. And so that poem, Who Am I, ends with, no matter who I am, Lord, this much I know, I am thine. And that's so relatable. I just love that about Dietrich. I feel like we could have chatted over beers for hours and hours, because he had an electric mind, but he had this water-soluble faith. He had this beautiful, living, breathing, soulful walk with Jesus. And no matter how smart he was or how much he wrote down, I think to spend time with that man would have been to sense the presence of the Holy Spirit and the aroma of Christ. And I really believe that certainly for Christians or non-believers, that what you see when you watch Dietrich or you spend time with him in his works, you definitely sense the aroma of Christ.
Was this something that was quite intentional for you working with Jonas to kind of create the on-screen persona of Dietrich? That like you were intentional about wanting him to be this very, in the midst of what I would say are quite not unrelatable, but just he is so relatable in the movie. You know what I mean? He's almost, even though he's making incredibly difficult ethical decisions, he is almost a calming, grounding presence that you look to naturally on the screen. Like, was this quite intentional with how you were working with the actor?
Well, it was in the script. So the character, as you see in the scenes, that is as written. But what I was able to do with Jonas, who plays Dietrich, is I wanted to capture his urgency and his athletic nature, which Dietrich had. We have him frozen in all these photographs, and he's in his suit and he's got his glasses on, and he just looks like the last thing he looks like is that he's spry and energetic. But I knew that he was a good athlete, and I knew that he had this electric personality. So I wanted that to be a centerpiece of the performance. So I talked to Jonas a lot about a boxer. I wanted him to move through the movie in scenes like a boxer would in the ring. And he comes in and he's like, did you ever deliver a couple of punches? And then he comes back. And you see that in the scene with the bishops in England, where he's saying the call to action that winds up becomes the Barman Declaration, that how he moves through the world is impacted by what he's feeling inside, sort of the electricity, the aliveness. So that was absolutely something that Jonas and I had discussed.
That's so cool. And it is, you said before that it's not a Christian film, but what's refreshing for me and so many others, I think whether you're Christian or not, to be honest, is to see a positive representation of faith in a very well-made, high-quality movie, which, for one reason or another, we don't. Yeah, it's rare. And I wonder, I'd love to get your thoughts and reflections on kind of this slight resurgence of faith being represented in movies, and well, particularly your experience working with Angel Studios, who have sort of become renowned for leading the charge for commissioning or supporting or funding all of these positive faith projects.
Well, they're not involved in funding. They distribute. They don't make these movies.
They're
movies
they're distributing them.
Yeah, they're distributors.
Right.
I think there's always been an underserved audience. So there's a hunger for stories that feel like this is my tribe. This movie understands me. So that's always the case. I would just hope that the bar would be raised. So there's some people out there that are making terrific ones. I don't know if you saw Ordinary Angels, but that's I would consider under the rubric of faith-based films, but very real, very honest. Good luck not crying your eyes out at that movie. So sometimes they're made really well. Under this same banner, atrocious movies are released, unwatchably bad movies.
Yeah.
And that, and they're called Christian or faith-based. And that gives the whole genre, anything genre adjacent, a really bad name. And so that increases the mainstream studio's desire to not be part of that. So they do a little, they dabble a little bit. I mean, Lionsgate has a long-term relationship with Kingdom, and Kingdom is making quality movies. But it's this dance. And really, it just comes down to money. Like if there was a faith-based movie or a movie about, if Bonhoeffer had made $100 million at the box office, then of course studios would have said, okay, let's make 10 Bonhoeffers. It's only about money. And as soon as they realize that there's money attached, they support it and they throw money at it, because money is the lingua franca of Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't exist to make great films and to change the culture. And it was like, no, Hollywood exists to make money. And so they'll do whatever it takes. If it's about, green chinchillas pulling off a bank heist, then if that's a hit, we'll have 10 of those.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for that insight. And well, Todd, you've been so gracious with your time, and I don't want to keep you for long, but I have one final question, which is essentially how making this movie, and you're at the other end of it now, how it's affected your personal faith. Like, are you at all a changed man after going through this experience of making Bonhoeffer?
Absolutely. It's that notion of how to apply bravery with urgency when it's not life and death. Like, how can I be brave every day? How can I be brave with my kids? How can I be brave with my wife? How can I be brave on behalf of strangers, of people in society, of people I don't understand? I think one of the biggest calls to bravery right now is for people of faith that see things completely differently politically to stop throwing Molotov cocktails at each other and start talking about what we have in common. And if the only thing we have in common is that we love Jesus, then we have to talk about that. And we have to say, what does that look like? How can we love each other? How can we listen to each other? How can we serve each other? Because if we're caught up in all the other nonsense, and if we're judging anybody, which Jesus is very clear about, judge not lest you be judged. The measure you use will be used against you. We should be doing everything we can to not judge. It's easy to be judgy right now. And we live in the internet generation where everything we judge, our latest meal, we judge someone's latest comment. There's a temptation and an invitation to only judge all day. So I think currently the way to be brave is to stop judging and start loving.
Thank you, Todd. And that comes across so much. That, I mean, I didn't know if haunted is the right word, but ever since watching Bonhoeffer, it's left a lingering thought. I still think about it most days. And it's that theme of bravery. I want to be braver, when I watch it. And I want my faith to transcend denomination and learn from everyone and what they bring from different walks of life. So I thank you for that. It's truly an inspiring and just great high quality film. I'm recommending it to everyone to go and watch it. And
thank you.
Yeah,
Benjamin.
Thank you so much for your time, Todd. Such a pleasure to meet you.
God bless you, and the peace of Christ be with you always.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.